Hey, Racers, Ben here. Very happy to welcome Mark back so I don't have to do everything while he's out having fun with his family. So there's a lot for us to go over today. We wanted to talk a little bit about V2 again, briefly on the DERC Army Season 2 that's coming, our racing team that we started. And then this episode mostly is going to be about analyzing. We have 11 horses from the community that people submitted. Thank you for that. We're going to be showing you some of the tools that we built that we use for our racing team. And we're going to be taking a look at your horses and giving you some insight to what we see. All right. So V2, Mark, you missed all of this. So the biggest one
I walked back into this seeing that the entire platform had changed.
Yes.
So I was excited to see how quick I could get back into it, though. So it's good stuff.
The biggest and best thing about this, and so especially for people that are new to this, is that D-Race moved off of Polygon. So you don't have to constantly put in these transactions. When Polygon gets network spikes and gas fees like quadruple, it's not going to screw with you. It's not going to slow anything down. You don't have to worry about those transactions getting stuck. Everything is instantaneous. Once of course, you have to deposit your DERC from MetaMask. You have to deposit your horses directly into this local server. And then from there, you have access to everything. Now, the cool things I think about V2 is not only is it faster, but the next stage of this, which is going to be the chest, the keys, the wearables, the sugar, the burning capabilities, all of that is coming. I asked a question, and I think it was Lorita that responded, which I really appreciate the response. I asked the question on Twitter, should we expect any more major developments or deployments in July? And they said, no, realistically, it's going to be August. So what I just got it props to D-Race on that one. When we as a community are asking for those kinds of things, we don't want to hold it to you guys. If it's later than August, that's fine. Just that insight, really helpful, because to me, what that indicates is that we have 2 more weeks left in July. And as soon as wearable technology shows up, you're going to have different stats. So that gives everybody at least this 2-week runway to really hammer your testing down and analyze your horses, because as soon as you start putting on wearables, your horses are going to change. So I think it's really important that you take advantage of this the next 2 weeks. Any thoughts on that
one? And you're
Mark?
definitely going to need a way to look at the horses that you already have and the horses that you might be interested in getting. We also love to talk about breeding and the next generation of horses. And as soon as you add wearables into this whole thing, those parents' stats are going to change. Those foals are going to change. It's going to be really important that you fully understand your horse before then.
Fully understand your foal. Yeah, and I've been doing this breeding study, and I constantly am finding that a lot of the parents are barely raced. And now, as we go through some of the analysis today that you'll see, we'll probably be hitting on a few of those things. Another thing I wanted to switch to now is the DERC Army Season 2. So if you're out there and you're looking at this project and you're new to this one especially, or if you have a family and a life and you don't spend 10 plus hours a day on D-Race and Discord, you might not fully understand what's coming. But basically, teams are forming, and these teams are competing as a season, as we would with a regular sport. So one of our commitments here with our D-Racers YouTube channel, we wanted to make sure that we created a team. So we created Team DERC, the D-Racers Elite Racing Club. And so you'll be getting some insight to what it's like for teams to compete, what these competitions look like. And similar to what we did with the Unraced Gen 1 tournament, we'll be doing similar to that in more detail. So if you have a really good horse and you're looking for a team to join, there are some teams out there that are available. In the future, we'll probably create our own little minor league team where we bring in new prospects, vet them out, and see if you fit on our team, if there's holes for you. But there's going to be a lot of details to go over from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's already a dozen, maybe 13 teams that are gearing up for Season 2. So it's going to be a lot of competition.
Yeah. Now with that, so when I flip over here, this is one of our tools that we have. Now, this is not publicly facing just because we're constantly modifying things. This is the way we analyze our own stables. So we have 5 guys on our team, a lot of horses. So what we're going to be focusing on today is going down here in the green. You're going to see about 11 horses that we've added in. Now, we have our 2 favorites, Burr and Skondert, down below, so we could show some comparison. And we're going to be going through turf, synthetic, and dirt. Now,
that's important to note that these that we added in are from the community. I think you mentioned that earlier. But when you look at this list, some of this is from our team, some of it is horses we're just trying to analyze, and some's for this video, so that you guys can get a sense of what it looks like for us to analyze a horse.
Yeah, and so like right now, as we were getting prepared for season 2, we got to figure out which horses do we want to put as our varsity lineup at specific furlong lengths. So that way, as we compete, we know where it is. And I think we have like 60 to 70 horses that we're studying. So there's a lot of competition to figure out which is the best horse for it. So this is a tool that we built. This is not about podium rate. This is not about PPR. We call this the indisputable score. And the way that we do this is we take your horse and we compare every single time it's ever ran to what we consider the expectation to be a first place horse, a second place horse, and a third place horse. And then those results are all weighted. So if you've had a really fast horse that competes against other really fast horses, and you unfortunately get fourth place and fifth place, but you did run a spectacular race, you would get credit for this. Whereas if you have a slower horse and you intentionally find like only 6 out of 12 are full and you have a better chance of winning, and you've been padding your percentages on that one, you're not going to get the credit for this. So this is all about time trials, again, making it indisputable to us. It's whether or not this horse is showing it has the speed to run on these tracks.
Yeah, exactly. When you have a horse that comes in second a lot, you need to know whether or not that's because it can never bump the top horse, or if it's because it really just got unlucky. It went up against one of the best out there. And as you'll see when we analyze these different surfaces, there's multiple horses that can all run the same distance. And so if you walk into a race with all of these showing up, your odds drop that you're going to do as well. But overall, you could still run a time that would be worthy of a top spot. Even if you end up fourth or fifth place, you might have podiumed against the rest of the field on a different race. So that's important to know. That goes into our analysis here. So as we talk about each of these horses and their scores, just know that it is a proprietary math formula, but overall, and I think you'll get to this, there's numbers over 18% are, you've got a decent horse. Anything over 21, you've got a pretty good horse. And anytime you see something highlighted in bold on here, that means you have a really, really good horse. And most likely you're going to want to hit those tracks more. So we'll deep dive into each of these horses.
Something to point out too is when you see this, you're going to see these percentages. We're going to be going over these in details. And then to the right of it, where you got those brackets, that number is the experience of that horse on that track. So starting right here, we could see a 19.65% with 144 races on Turf 5. The more races you see, that just makes you feel more confident in that percentage. On Discord, way too often, you'll see people that make comments where, did the algorithms change? My horse used to be good and it's no longer good. And then when you look them up and you find that the horses ran less than 30 times, especially, but like 5, 6, 7 races. And it's like, yeah, you might've gone lucky on the first 2, but normal distribution, stats wise, you have that bell curve where the dead center is your average. It's going to run faster and slower on both sides of that. And there's going to be these cyclical curves. And so if you've gotten a brand new foal or just picked up a new horse and the first 3 races are stunning, it doesn't mean that that horse is permanently stunning. You might have gone and you're the fastest out the gate. That's just the way that RNG landed. And then the next 3 might be the complete opposite. And you might be running the slowest you've ever seen. And you might want to wonder what's going on here. You got to hammer these tracks down. And you're going to see us talk about that more and more and more. I'm just going to point out my Scondert here. You'll see it on Turf 8. It's my favorite place to run him. 279 races, but he's maintaining this 25%. That's why I just get so excited by Scondert. He is able to break multiple hundreds and maintain that spectacular pace. That's a sign that that horse is consistent. It doesn't mean that he's going to be able to compete against Gen 2s and Gen 3s of the future, but right now he's chewing down Gen 1s pretty easily. If the lower your percentages, just know that that's how you've competed as is. The next thing that you got to recognize is as more and more horses start racing, the competition is getting bigger. So Let's start with Borgia here. You got a 19.65%. In our opinion, you need to be above a 20% to know that you're like in a really healthy position. 19.65 is kind of fringe. When you get down to 18% and lower, you're most likely no longer going to be making a profit. So I wouldn't be surprised if when you started, it might have been a 21, 22%, but over time, we're watching these numbers slowly decay as you're getting more better horses appearing, more people are using the game. So my concern for you on this one is your profitability definitely was there. Taking a look at the deracing page and looking at where you are on this one, if I'm sorry for bouncing around too much, but on turf fives, I could tell that you have had a profit. So your profitability of being 2.9 per race, that's pretty good. Don't know if it's going to maintain for that long. So if you start seeing you're not making the money on that horse anymore, it might be because just the competition pool has increased. But I'm glad you got 144 races. That's a good start.
Yeah, I find that, and we use this in some of our other tools. We're not going to show it here today, but we typically track how well a horse is doing in terms of earnings over time. And I recognize that can change. You can have 1 DERC races that you're running all the time. You barely make any increase. You can do 2s and 3 DERC races and see that grow faster. But typically, if you see that starting to dip back down toward a lack of profitability, that's most likely due to additional competition coming in, or just a downturn in your cycle. And so what you have to pay attention to, and you mentioned it, you might have 3 incredibly fast races followed by 3 of your worst, but it can actually be 30 incredible races followed by 30 of your worst. And so that's why when we say, you got to have at least 30 plus, I would recommend having 50 plus before you can even start to see an up and down cycle within that. You may see little mini ups and downs, but to see the larger curvature of your horse going up and back down, you have to get over 50. And that's also when you start to see this percentage, our indisputable score, not move as much. That needle is just barely going to move now. When you've got up to 150 races, we're talking a fraction of a percent that it's going to move after each race. Whereas some of these horses that have done, well, definitely if you've done under 10, but even the ones that have 20, 25, 30 races, you're going to see that percentage swing pretty heavily. You get a win, it's going to bump up. You get a loss, it's going to drop.
Yeah.
And so when we analyze these, for us as our team, we say you got to have 25 races. Like you have to have a minimum of 25 before we even start having a conversation about whether or not you're moving up or down in the right direction, whether or not the field is growing stronger against you, or if you're growing stronger against the field. You got to have 25 plus. So for us, that's what we're looking for. So when we analyze these, and I know you're going to talk about profitability or lack thereof with different horses or percentages, you also have to keep in mind that we could do this video again in 2 weeks after you guys all race your horses, and this board could look totally different.
Absolutely. Like another thing I could point out, my own personal experience, Burra was your first horse. Skondert was my first horse. Burra's better at dirt than Skondert. And when the game started, there was only one hippodrome, and it was Adams Dirt, which is now Greenfield, which is a little bit different. But Skondert at the time, I want to say he was around 20 to 22% podium rate. And I'm watching you with Burra making money. I was constantly racing Fash, who races very similar lengths at the time as Skondert. And he would just beat me more often than not. And it was just disheartening as a new player that invested a good chunk of change into this project. And it's just like, geez, my horse can't make money. This sucks. But over time, I discovered that Skondert is exceptional on turf. He's pretty good in certain spots on synthetic. You'll see that in here. And Skondert's now, his overall podium rate is like 35.2%. So I was losing a lot back in the day, but by understanding my horse and knowing where he's really strong, it's allowed me to just cut out the noise. I did go in the hole as I was researching him because I did hit all these areas. And then when I really honed in on what he was great at, I've stayed in the pocket. And that's been my method. And Skondert has been one of my most profitable horses.
Yeah. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at Borgia here and bounce between the turf, synthetic, and dirt tabs. Because what I'd like to point out is that There are a couple of tracks that might be interesting here on turf. I think that's 10s and 12s.
Yep.
But then as we jump to synthetic, as we jump to dirt, things might change.
Okay.
And you'll find that a lot of horses can definitely run synthetic and turf, but not as many horses can run dirt.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that will be commonplace that we'll see here.
Same thing too. Here we got another one where you're just a little bit on the fringe. Amazing experience, but I wonder if you've been noticing that it's not winning as much as it used to. Well, going on the long range, I'm very intrigued by this here. That synthetic 10 with 37, you're over that 25 threshold, so you have a good amount of data, and you're maintaining a 21.35. That's a good sign. Like you said, though, one or two bad races, that might go from 21.35 down to 18 pretty quick. So it's not saying that this is guaranteed going to be your track, but I would make sure that you're hitting that when you can. I wouldn't necessarily either say like you can give up on some of these lower ones. You might not want to run synthetic sevens all too many times, but 7 is not a big data set. So if you have a high profit day, you maybe want to throw some 1 DERCs in there. Just chip away at that and get your numbers up. If you have a horse that you plan on keeping for a long time, definitely would train all of them. If you're just going for flips, I understand the need to just try to attack your best chance and move on. But you got some good potentials on these. Switching over to dirt, your sevens. That's a good start.
Yeah, that dirt 7 is really intriguing. 27% is one of the higher numbers that you'll see here after you get over 25 races. I suspect that that's fairly profitable. I don't know if you have that pulled up on the.
That's on the dirt sevens. So if I take a look at his
sevens.
So God, you've had very bad luck. The fact that you've lost money on this one, you should be winning a lot. So
Now keep in mind, when you go over there, you'll see that some of the data there is missing. They only have 22 runs, and that's because these websites and data scrapers are all being pulled at different times. True. So it's entirely possible that they figured out they have an average versus the population average that's almost a full half second. Mm-hmm. That's incredible. And they started running it more and brought that score up. And that's what we're talking about. You might have been not very profitable initially because you're running a bunch of 1 DERCs. And you even when you win, it might only be half full. You win a few DERC and then you lose a bunch in a row and you're in the hole. But if you've started switching this one to 2s and 3s, or at least 1s, 2s, and 3s, you're going to see that PPR move up closer to 0 and hopefully move into the positive, because that is a very good number that you're seeing there. Agreed. We want to see a slightly higher first place percentage, but I think that might come. It looks like you might have turned a corner in the last 10 races or so.
Yep. So for everybody, if you use that deracing.org stat site, you'll be able to go in here. I personally think that the average versus population average, that's one of your best things to look for. The PPR, you just can have bad luck. So it's obviously we want profitability, but you might not have a good chance at that. All right, so we jump over to Rum Runner here.
Yeah, I wanted to point out here that like you can see some of these are dark gray or grayed out. And you mentioned that means you're basically not showing up. Rum Runner is one of those. I think we've got Duke, we've got Tyrant Slaughter.
Yep.
Looks like Madam CJ Walker. Throald can't do it. And looks like Neo Geo hasn't been raced enough.
Yeah.
But this is my point. There's very few dirt horses out there. And so when you find a dirt horse, it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And if you can find a dirt horse that does well, it's really valuable. So again, those dirt 7s for Borgia, that's incredible. It looks like Jimmy Crack Corn has some good dirt data. So I was actually thinking we could jump down to Jimmy Crack Corn real quick.
Something I was going to say.
And analyze that one.
One of the reasons why Greenfield is so hard is it consumes the most stamina. So I'm going to be really curious as we flip around if Jimmy Crack Corn is also going to be good on the longer range. So if we jump over to Jimmy Crack Corn here on 8s, 9s, and 10s, you have these higher percentages. So my guess is that Jimmy Crack Corn is a higher stamina horse. And the fact that it's able to compete at Greenfield just means that it has more in that tank. Whereas most horses, I don't think they have the stamina and that's why Greenfield just consumes them.
Yeah. Can you pull up 256 on the D-Racing site?
Yeah, let's go there. 256?
Yeah, 256.
Okay. And what track are we looking for?
I was just mostly looking to sort the average versus population average,
Okay.
and just see how many of these are positive. Yeah, that's incredible. Like that's almost 15 tracks,
13. Yep.
13 that are positive. That means this horse is running really well. You've got mid-teens on your first place percentages. You've got wow, you got a 61%.
That's impressive.
That that's unreal. I mean, there's only 21 races there, but still, that's amazing. So yeah, definitely keep running the synthetic eights.
Yeah, it seems to definitely like the synthetics. If we switch over to turf, how are we doing, Jimmy? Yep, and that makes sense too. It's showing up on 13, 14, 15. I bet that's a stamina horse. So
Absolutely.
doesn't mean you can't do well down here. I just think that it means that you're going to find a thinner competitive market up higher because it's hard to find horses that have stamina. So that might be a good place to test more. 12, 16, 14, not a ton of races. So yeah, I would push those and see if those numbers climb. Holding at 30% on nines, that's a good horse.
Yeah, that's a really good horse. And I'm also looking at that 256 means that's a Gen Zero, most likely. Which means
Mm-hmm.
you should definitely be breeding this horse.
All right. So let's see. Should we just start chipping away a couple other ones on these?
Sure.
Rum Runner, looking pretty good. I definitely would try some of these 14s up top. It doesn't look like the short distance is where you like, but you have very little data on these ones. If we jump over on synthetics, it just, yeah, definitely seems to be more of a synth horse.
Yeah, and that can mean a couple of different things. It can mean that their speed is just so-so,
Mm-hmm.
and can get up to better speed because they have a little better stamina, or it could mean that they have just like kind of a low reaction number, or sorry, actually probably a high reaction number, meaning that it takes longer for them to get out of the gate. And so those early tracks, they're just a little too far behind, and they can't really catch up until the middle of the distances. So that's something to pay attention to as well. And you'll probably notice that when you're watching your horse on the tracks, on the particular races, you'll see that they're just not able to hold up, stay with those other horses up until they get into those upper distances.
Mm-hmm.
When you get up into the eights, nines, tens, 11s, it looks like Rum Runner loves it. We got 3, 4 tracks that are possibly netting you a profit.
I'm interested by Tyrants here. The fact that he has 111 races pulling in a 15%. I'd love to know the story behind this. Like, was it good for a period of time and then that drop off take place? I noticed when turf or when we're actually on synthetic right now. So yeah, that one's interesting to me. Why you have that much race experience on this? So like 3733.
It could just be that it being good right next to that, because that's sevens, but they're actually good at eights, nines, tens. They may have just felt that the numbers were there for them, but I suspect it's changed recently. There's probably more competition at that level.
Yeah, I mean, you're barely faster than the average population on that one. Your podium rates are high, and you've walked away with a profit. If you're still racing this one, I might recommend not anymore. You might want to cut your losses or cut your profits, keep those, and then move on to some of these other tracks. Your synth nines look really good.
Yeah, and they've done 112 there.
Yeah,
So
so you know that
definitely they're doing the sevens and nines together.
Yeah, hopefully you're stopping on the sevens, I would suspect. Now, let's take a look. That's on Tyrant. What we got for these? Doesn't look like you have much of a dirt horse on those ones. And on turf, you might have a pocket to be worth testing on here. Since synthetic is a lot easier on the horse, you're on a 9 doing well. I would be curious if you would show up a little bit earlier. You got a 7, so you tested your 9s. That makes sense. I would be curious to see a little bit more activity over here and see if you
This may just be an example of a horse that really likes synthetic.
True.
Because typically when you see those upper distances being good, especially on synthetic, you would suspect that the upper turfs and some of the lower dirts would still be good because you're burning that stamina that's supposedly there. But it might not actually have as much stamina as some of the other horses we just talked about, but instead is relying on the surface type being its benefit. And it's kind of got that middle of that synthetic, which is probably pretty average when you think about how much stamina is being burned. It's probably an average stamina horse.
And for people that don't know this, it seems to be that there are 3 speed scores. So I'm going to arbitrarily make up a number. If you have from 0 to 100, 100 is top speed, you might have a horse that is a 75 on dirt, 77 on synth, and a 76 on turf. And that's when D-Race writes about how your horse has a preferred track. The belief is that there are 3 embedded speed tracks, or speeds that they work from. And so, like, as Mark was saying, your horse might really like synth. It might mean that your speed on synth is the fastest of the 3. And that would make sense of what we're seeing here.
Now, yeah, and then you pair that with the stamina score, and you immediately throw out, your stamina is getting burned too fast on dirt. It doesn't have enough to compete. And then you throw in the fact that it's also its least favorite track, and your horse can't even show up there.
Now, with Mary J, I think it'd be helpful for us to talk about some of these ones that are a little bit less raced. Now, like with Mary J, I noticed that you have a lot of experience right here on the 13 furlong, but again, 16.36%. So if I look this up to 29.48.
Now those are the upper turfs, correct?
Correct. That's the 13 turf. So I'm curious on this one. You do have a PPR, but man, again, I think you've gotten really lucky. You're slower than average on this one. You have walked away with a profit. Your podium rates are stunningly good. But realistically, you might not have raced fast horses on those ones. So if you are still racing those 13s, or if you have been recently and you feel like you're not winning as much, I don't think it's an algorithm change. I think it just, you had a really, really good luck streak. I would probably put focus elsewhere.
With that high of a first place percentage, I suspect they threw a bunch of their lower limit races in early. Which is, again, when we started the video, I was mentioning that you might need to run 60 races somewhere to see where they truly settle in, because you can run 30 good ones up front. And when I say 30 good ones, I don't mean you're winning 30 out of 30, but that your odds are higher that you're going to win in those because of how well they're running. You have a cycle that's going to happen. We see it on every horse. Their cycles are different lengths, though. Some horses, they can switch a cycle in 7 to 8 races. Others, it's 25, 30, 40 races, which just means that before you have an up and down wave complete, for some horses, it's only 20 races. Others, it's 70, 80. So this is something where that may come back. It might. They may actually be able to settle back in, but I suspect that this one will settle just below that 18%.
And for the people that if we don't have the time to completely analyze every single furlong and all these things, if you're looking at these pages, because I'm trying to keep these up a lot, ultimately the rule of thumb that we would say to our own team is that if you have a number that's appearing, race that track. You race it until it goes gray. And then if it's gray, it doesn't mean to give up. It means that it's not looking good so far. But if you can add some races to it, but we especially like right here, seeing a 25 bold, that 25 is a high number. That's internally what we say is an excellent start. You only have 8 races on this one. So I would hit that a few more times and see if that 25 was a couple good races and you're just not good there, or maybe that is where your horse really likes. But I definitely would just be throwing in some 9s. I would do 12s and 14s and 15s just to see whether or not they show up. And if they don't, this system would adapt and it would just kick you off the board. But that's something I would definitely recommend.
I'm looking at this and like, if you don't mind going back real quick there, where you just were on Mary J, it is really fascinating from 9 to 15, even though not all of them are white. You've got only 5 races on 10s. You could literally win the next 5 in a row and have an amazing horse. You have no idea. The 9 on 11s, all you need is one more like 3rd place and you're on this board. You know, with the 20% on the 12s, you may see good or bad. Again, it's really important that you really race those, do 10, 20 on as many as you can to see if that horse can hold that percentage. And I'm looking across that whole board. They've almost got 13s. They might be able to hold on to 14s. It looks like they're going to hold on to 15s. That's a decent turf horse right there, especially at distance.
And do comparisons and looking at some of our team again, we got 279 races on this one. If I come up here looking at peg dead, 177 holding a 25. If you have a horse that is staying above like that 22, 23% hammered down, that is such a good horse. 356, but slipping down to 18.48. Again, competition might be pushing that area. That horse might not be a 12 furlong horse. So this is how we look at this. It's very, very useful for us. All right, so I'm going to keep on Mary Jane for a little bit. Switching over synthetic, it doesn't look like you have any good luck on this one. You do have some decent experience. So I'm going to guess that synthetic is not your track. The fact you have nothing lit up this early, you do have some, take it to your own discretion would be my opinion, but I'm guessing synth is not yours.
Yeah.
Dirt though. 19.2 is not huge, but that's interesting that you have 70 and you're holding on 5s. Again, to me, that indicates that it's a pretty decent stamina. So switching back over to our turf, that would make me have more confidence in these numbers. Knowing that you showed up on a dirt 5, yeah, I would go back to your turfs. I don't think it's going to be your dirt as your track, but
I'm looking at Mary J's numbers, and you're probably feeling this. If you're watching this, you're probably thinking this is kind of a fringy horse, right? It's not quite good enough to make you a ton of money. And that's how a lot of us feel about a lot of our horses. Sure, we have some that are champions. We have some that are absolute donkeys. I've got a horse that, what was it? We saw it, its best surface was like a 14% podium rate. 14. And I've raced it hundreds of times. That's really bad. So you can have both ends here. And Mary J is probably just somewhere in the middle there. So it's about analyzing that, finding that 1 or 2 tracks that you can hit on and seeing if you can just go into cruise control and make some money back, or get ready to turn this horse into some sugar cubes in the future.
Well, that's a good point. Though with the sugar cubes, this might all adjust internally. Right now, everything's about making dirt. But as soon as you start getting experience and you start acquiring sugar, we might find that an 18% horse is still somewhat profitable because that experience might be netting something. But as of right now, our expectations are much higher. So for those horses that we point out that are in that 19.5 range, yeah, it might not make you dirt, but as soon as V2 comes out, hopefully in August, the full thing, you have a secondary net income that you could be acquiring. All right, would you want to pick out the next horse?
Yeah, the other one that I wanted to take a look at is Best Bauer there.
Best Bauer, okay. Let's start on turf.
Yeah, I think so. So the reason why I wanted to pick it out is there's a couple of them at the 13s and 14s. I'm not really looking at the 6 there. There's just not enough races, and there's really not enough at the 13. But that 14 at almost 21% is really interesting. What I can't tell, and I'm hoping we can switch over and see something on synthetic or dirt, is whether or not that horse has any skill elsewhere. And okay, it looks like synthetic is a little better. Might just be that synthetic is a preference on a surface. And then yeah, definitely. Well, that's an interesting. I don't know what to make of that. This is one of those situations where there's just not enough races there to fully understand that horse. I think the most we saw was like 30 something. So. Yeah, not even 20 something maybe. It might just be a fringy horse, but you got a 23% first place rate on those synthetic 7s. That's not too bad if you can hold that rate.
Well, yeah, this is unfortunate too, is if you take a look at the average of its population, your turfs 12s, 13s, and 14s, you're faster than all of them. You were not profitable. The one that you're fastest on the average, you have a loss. You've never gone first place. So I just think, again, this is a situation where you've had a lot of bad luck on some of these races. I would not give up on this. 18, 7, 27 definitely would be adding more to this. The fact that you're faster, you should start to speed up. So I would guess that this is a turf horse.
Yeah. The other thing I would caution though, and this is just something from experience, because obviously you and I have raced thousands and thousands of races over the months. Turf is still being tested by a lot of people. There's not as much competition that's hardcore there yet. Dirt, you'll see that the races don't fill up as much because there's a handful of good horses and that's it. Synthetic tends to fill up. Everyone can race on synthetic somewhere. Even if you have a bad horse, you can try. So a lot of people try there. And then turf is the most recent one. And I think people are still figuring out if their horses have enough stamina to do the 13s, 14s, 15s. That means there's a lot of horses out there that don't have enough stamina who are running 13s, 14s, and 15s, and thus driving up that average time. So I see this with a lot of horses. Their times against the population in those upper turfs tend to be some of their best scores. And that's because the population is just not zeroed in to which horses should be running. Those numbers will come down, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't take advantage right now.
Yep. When turf first came out, I saw that because I knew I sucked at dirt. I was okay at synth. And so I was desperate for turf, and come be it, turf was my track. And it was soon, I was winning everywhere. I think every single track I was above 40, 45%, especially initially. And 14s and 15s, Skondert won a lot, just like you were saying. And I think it's because a lot of people just didn't know if their horse was any good. They would throw it at it. Skondert was okay. You could see that he's fallen off on the 14s and the 15s. It's dropped down. He is more of that mid-range turf. So even though in the beginning I was winning a lot, the reality was he's not that fast on those tracks. So as more and more competition shows up, I backed out. So yeah, it's a good point.
Smart. I think there's a few other horses on here, and we don't have to dive into each one. If you're watching this video and this is one of your horses, you've probably got a pretty good understanding of how to look at these charts now. But I did want to talk about Neo Geo there at the bottom. We got this added to our list, and it basically is unraced. You'll see that having won that one Turf 12 gave it one of the highest possible scores you can have. That is awesome, except for it's 1 out of 1. I had a horse that actually broke a world record on its second race ever, and then proceeded to lose in perpetuity afterward, and doesn't even remotely show up on the track that she broke the record on. So that you've got to race a lot. If that doesn't prove it, if nothing else, Neo Geo, this will be fun to do a comparative video on in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, taking a look at this one. So he was 1 and 3, first place. You jump over to synth. He's only raced 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on synth. 1 got a first place. Did you do anything on dirt? All right. So you're a man of ones. So you hit 1, 1, 1. Repetition is key. So if you're, I'm assuming you're new, unless you have more horses. Sorry if I'm talking down to you on this one, but you definitely want to get those numbers. And in my experience, when I get a new horse, if you hit like you just did, hit there a couple more times. You might not need to do your scatter shot, because if you want to maintain profitability, winning races is a great way to experiment your other tracks. So the fact that you won a couple first places already, that's great. Start there. Hit those synthetic 3s again. See how many times it takes before you get it again. Hit your turf 12s again a couple more times. See if that was a fluke, or you might have yourself a 20%, 30% podium rate consistently after that. So I would definitely hit those. And then if you're stockpiling a little bit of dirt from there, then maybe start spreading out. But if you're exceptionally new, I don't normally like jumping from the far ends unless I'm testing a foal. So if I'm doing a breeding test, I like to do that. But if it's a brand new horse that I'm experimenting with personally, when I find something I can hit on, I'm going to just do a little bit of expansion outside, because usually the horses can compete decently in clusters. So it's rarely 2s, 7s, and 14s that it's, or it wouldn't be that case, but would be good at. It's going to be 2, 3, 4. And it's going to be 8, 9, 10. So the fact that you have that hit where it is, maybe throw in some 11s and 13s and see if you have a above and below range outside that mark. All right.
Yep. So that's all good stuff.
Yeah. And so again, this is our racing team data. We did build that detailed furlong analysis tool with all of that great data that got scraped by Super Jockey, that got stopped. But he was able to get that data back somehow. So he just gave us an enormous data dump. I've been recovering from the sickness, almost gone completely. So I'm still playing a little bit to catch up, but we'll be updating those sheets we want to give access to these tools, our specific team tools. There's a little bit of proprietary nature because we're going to be competing on a different level. So we'll share a lot of our stuff with you guys. Some of this stuff we're not going to go into detail with because we want to make sure other teams aren't stealing some of our methodologies. But when it comes to helping you understand your horse, we definitely want to do what we can. So stay tuned on that. We'll give some updates and we'll share some of that information. And then, the DERC Army community project build.
I think it's just important to point out that the DERC Army is starting to gather a lot of these projects, especially the collaborative projects where we're trying to share content. And I think that's going to be really important. Like you mentioned, there's always going to be proprietary information. And I think it's important that the original data is available. And then what you do with that data is what you do with that data. I honestly don't care. We try to help out, but that doesn't mean we unveil everything that we do with that data. We do try to make sure that the data is available. And that's something that the DERC Army is starting to do.
Yep. And I can tell you from our own experience. So we've been building our own sheets and formulas since the very first race. So I'm guessing we have a couple hundred hours clocked into developing this stuff. The amount of tools that we've built and everything that we've gone through, we found theories. I can say that the D-Race RNG is really, really good at blocking reverse engineering. I don't think anybody out there has any silver bullet or magic formula that gets you guaranteed anything. Even our stuff that we have, a lot of our horses aren't profitable. So the key here is to identify when you have something that's great. And if you have something that's great, it might be short-lived because competition is going to constantly evolve. So if you have a track and you have a horse that's good on that one, you better be hammering down because in 3 months, it might not be as good anymore. So take advantage of when you see something and pounce on it now. That's going to be your best option to having some profitability, in my opinion.
And that's really good because V2 has allowed for an ecosystem where you can be all about racing. But the minute that you determine that your horse is not good at racing, that horse just shouldn't be part of a racing team. That's all it is at the end of the day. That horse can now go become a breeder, or it could be turned into sugar cubes. But at the end of the day, your horse can do a lot of different things for you, or will soon be able to. And racing is just one element. And we wanted to show off how we analyze potential racing horses. And I hope that this has been informative for all of you.
Yeah. And if you guys get a chance to race your horses and you want us to do a follow-up on it after maybe a couple of weeks of good data, send me messages and we'll take another look. But thank you guys. And yeah, we'll see you soon.